What's up, world? It's Willy What If here. I wanted to thank you for getting us to 100 subscribers and climbing so quickly. You're the best. As thanks, here is another new series. Today we'll be starting What If Naruto was adopted by Iruka Sensei? How much can change by one small act of kindness? Sometimes it's the smallest drops that cause the biggest ripples over time. Let's see how much changes in this alternate timeline. Hope you enjoy. Now let's begin. Part 1. Naruto again? Iruka's grimace seemed particularly severe as he squinted against the light from the morning sun. It wasn't as if these events had gotten worse, but their frequency appeared to have spiked dramatically in recent weeks. And where is he now? And quat. Laughing like a madman and leading a few jonin on a chase through town, Mizuki sighed, shaking his head. Why the Sandaime allows him to continue living in the village is beyond me. He's a nuisance, discounting simply what he is. And quat. There had been a significant pause in the man's statement that Iruka hadn't failed to pick up on. But then, many of the villagers and shinobi of Konohagakure had similar feelings about Uzumaki Naruto. If his fate had been left in their hands, he would not have survived past the day of his birth. Both instructors were standing at the base of the Hokage's tower. If it had been a normal morning, most of the citizens would be bustling by on their way to this or that, perhaps nodding respectfully to the two chunin. Instead, a small crowd was gathered just behind the pair, and they did little to hide their gawking and angry muttering. The object of every person's attention was a large swath of graffiti, which depicted crude representations of the Sandaime and a handful of senior staff. Calling the images rude would be the understatement of the century. Even Iruka had to admit that it would be hard to pin this prank on anybody other than the Uzumaki boy. As the onlookers turned into an increasingly outraged rabble, the scarred chunin closed his eyes, thinking back on the words the Hokage had recently imparted. Iruka. Naruto grew up without knowing the love of a parent, and for so long he has been treated poorly because of his birthright. He has to pull those pranks to get attention. Whatever the form, he wants somebody to recognize his existence. And quat. Iruka ground his teeth, turning on the crowd with a sharp look that quieted even the most disgruntled onlooker. The situation is being handled. Please return to your duties. And quat. It was a slow dispersal, but at least they all left without making a scene. Mizuki glanced at him with a quirked eyebrow before shaking his head and sidling off towards the academy building. Iruka stared up at the mural for a long moment, considering his leader's words again. He had been struggling with a difficult decision for weeks, but it seemed that he had finally stumbled upon an answer. With a sigh he turned and leapt onto the nearest building, making his way towards where he knew Naruto would be hiding. It had taken a few minutes, but Naruto had successfully evaded his pursuers and now sat lounging against a tree with a cheeky grin on his face. The youth was average in many ways, although his height was nothing to be jealous of. One might even consider the 6-year-old cute if they could look past arguably ridiculous green aviator goggles on his forehead, or the whisker-like scars on his cheeks. But that was all anybody ever saw. When they looked at Naruto, it was the Kyubi no Kitsune that forced its way into their minds. To them, Naruto was a haunting reminder from a dark past. The amiable blonde, however, knew nothing of this history. All he knew was that the villagers hated him. His smile faltered and faded as the citizens came back to his mind. The previously elated expression soured as he pouted to himself in a low mumble. Not my fault they don't like my artwork. Jerks. And quat. It was difficult for him to grapple with emotions and deal with hardships in life that most people barely even considered. He had been an orphan from birth, so he had been told, and no one in the village had been willing to take him in. The Sandaime had set him up with an apartment and a weekly stipend after the orphanage had removed him from its care. Apart from the Hokage, who obviously had very little time to spend with Naruto in the first place, there was only one other person that had ever expressed a benign interest in him. Iruka Sensei. The thought came as the man in question appeared in front of him, arms folded and looking cross. Iruka was not actually Naruto's teacher, but for better or worse the child seemed to have adopted him as a loose relative after being shown only a modicum of kindness. Oh, hey Iruka Sensei, he chimed, with only a small amount of pink coming to his face to indicate any embarrassment at being caught. His sole role model's petulant look told him that a lecture was coming. Naruto, this is the third incident this week, and one of your worst to date. What were you thinking when you decided to publicly insult the Hokage, who has shown you nothing but good intentions your whole life? Nothing was said about the other members included in the graffiti. Iruka knew the reaction he would get simply by mentioning the old man. If your dream is to become the best Hokage that Konoha has ever seen, why would you do such a thing? Why, Naruto? He knew what answer that he'd get, but he wanted to hear the boy to say it. It's funny seeing the villagers react, he grumbled, pouting and averting his eyes from Iruka's chastising gaze. A quick glance back showed the chunin raising eyebrow, as if to say, is that all? Naruto sighed, folding his arms. I don't know. And quat. The response was honest. Iruka knew. How was a 6-year-old supposed to explain that his actions were meant to instigate a reaction from people in order to garner attention? The Sandaime's words echoed again in the man's mind. With a tired exhale, Iruka stepped over to the broad tree trunk, sliding down it to settle next to the troublemaker. "Look, Naruto," he began, staring up at the summer sky. "I know you want the village to recognize you, or at the very least not spurn you at every turn. And quat." The questioning look in the boy's eyes elicited a fond eye roll. "To not hate you, I mean. And quat." The blonde's grimace returned swiftly at the more explicit term. The question was coming. He could see the words forming on Naruto's lips, and he held up a hand. "I've told you already, I can't tell you why they do, at least not beyond saying that they're foolish. Anyway, as I was saying, this isn't the way to go about getting people to acknowledge you. You want to become a ninja, right?" The boy's vigorous nodding only confirmed his passion. "And you know that to become Hokage you have to be a really strong ninja, right?" Another nod. "Then why not focus all of this energy you seem to have on training instead? Pick up a kunai or a few shuriken and do some target practice, try some sparring, or go to the library and quat." Naruto's features had gotten darker and darker as his mentor continued, until finally he was simply staring at the ground. Iruka stopped, hesitant to inquire. The boy saved him the trouble. "Iruka Sensei, none of the stores will sell me any ninja stuff. I can only practice my taijutsu on the wooden training posts, and the library is always closed." And quat. The Chunin had to bite his tongue to keep himself from commenting on the last note. The library was never closed, but the keepers obviously felt the same as the shop owners did. It was hard to look at the downtrodden orphan, the child that should have been revered by all, reduced to the village prankster because of unreasonable cruelty. Iruka stamped down the righteous anger building in his chest before continuing. "I want to ask you something, Naruto," he began hesitantly, not sure if even he was ready for what was about to leave his mouth. The somber blonde looked up questioningly, the rims of his eyes shimmering with unshed tears of frustration. It was hard to look into those blue eyes and see the little boy inside instead of the demon fox that had killed Iruka's parents. But that was the difference between the Chunin and most of the village. He knew that Naruto was a normal child, simply suffering from the refusal of his whole world to accept him, and all because of something that was outside of his own control. "Would you like to come live with me?" And quat. The silence that followed was deafening. Naruto's eyes widened, narrowed suspiciously like he was expecting some kind of trick, then widened again when he realized that the man was serious. After lacking a response for a few moments, Iruka coughed and continued a bit awkwardly. "I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to. I know you don't like having supervision, and you probably don't want an adult looking over your shoulder constantly, and quat." He trailed off lamely, rubbing the back of his neck. Naruto seemed to be even more upset now, his face contorted with tears beginning to escape down his scarred cheeks. Iruka nearly apologized and retracted the offer when the small boy gripped his sleeve tightly. No response was given in words. The huge, ridiculous smile and unchecked tears streaming down his face were answers enough. It took a while for Naruto to get himself together enough to talk again, but once he did, his exuberance was palpable. Iruka understood more than most what not having parents meant for a child growing up. The poor boy's reaction only confirmed what he had learned on his own. More than anything else, Naruto wanted a family, somewhere he could be appreciated just for being himself. It may not be everything a normal child had, but for Konoha's pariah, the boy shunned from birth, it was the world. "I'll do my best, Yondaime, to see your son become the man you would have wanted him to be." If gossip were a sport, the citizens of Konoha would likely be the best in the world. Their whispers naturally frequented topics involving Naruto, although recently for reasons other than his unmentionable heritage and history. Rumor had it that an academy instructor had adopted the boy, one Umino Iruka. Of course, while in a normal society the charitable act of adoption might raise a person's status to some degree, this was a special case. The adoptee was Uzumaki Naruto, the Kyubi no Kitsune. Almost overnight Iruka became the talking point of the village, and almost as quickly began drawing the same looks his new house guest always garnered. At first he would glare back, but when Naruto started mimicking the action he decided a change of tactics was necessary. Instead, he smiled, and slowly the boy began smiling as well. Naruto's was more of a defiant smirk, but it was better than the alternative. To say Naruto's illicit activities ceased immediately would be twisting the truth. The problem was, as Iruka quickly learned, that no structure had ever been introduced into his life. There were no consequences for his offenses, no praise for his accomplishments, and worst of all, nobody to tell him the reasons behind anything. The first few weeks were some of the hardest the Chunin had ever experienced. Iruka was a teacher, although a fairly new one, and had some experience with kids. But being an instructor was a far stretch from acting as a parent. It took many hours speaking to the Hokage and discreetly asking the advice from unbiased parties to finally come up with a solution that worked. Even then, it took nearly a month to see marked improvement in behavior. But there it was. Uzumaki Naruto, renowned thorn in the side of Konoha, was improving. through simply being consistent with punishments and criticisms, as well as always recognizing and praising his accomplishments. Slowly but surely he stopped acting out. About a month and a half after Naruto had moved into Iruka's apartment, they were sitting together and having a one-sided discussion on table manners. Iruka could tell he wasn't so much being ignored as Naruto had started to think of something else that had been on his mind. Living together for a while had given the shinobi a better grasp of how the boy's mind worked. "What is it, Naruto? You seem distracted by something. Anyo, Iruka Sensei?" he asked uncomfortably, shifting around a few bits of rice with his chopsticks. Another marked change Iruka had been thankful to see was that Naruto seemed to think a lot more before something burst from his mouth unfiltered. He had not opened up much, but the boy dwelled on things to a greater extent than Iruka had thought. "You said that I should focus my energies on being a great ninja, right?" He stopped for a moment at the man's nod. "Well, I was just thinking, 'cause most kids start at the academy at my age. I was just wondering." "And what?" he repeated with failing confidence, looking down at his food. "I already put in your paperwork," Iruka grinned, knowing where the question was leading. "You'll be starting at the academy after the summer session is concluded. He had wanted to keep it as a surprise for later, but now was as good a time as any other to tell him. The way Naruto's face lit up was a memory he was likely to keep for years to come. There was no need to tell the ecstatic prospective Jinan the pains he had gone through to allow him admittance to the Ninja Academy. The Hokage had personally pulled some strings for it to happen, for which Iruka had been extremely grateful. He was frustrated that such a thing had to be done, though. Most of the administrators had refused to cooperate, forcing the Sandaime's hand. "We're going to start training next week, alright? And quat. But I thought I was going to the academy to learn things and train," Naruto wondered aloud. That was, Iruka supposed, a logical conclusion, but it simply wasn't what was expected. "Naruto, I know you've tried to practice on your own, but you'll need to be a little more prepared. Training to become a shinobi takes serious work and dedication, and you can bet your classmates will have received some sort of training from their families before getting to the academy." And quat. A scowl that began to deteriorate into a dejected frown prompted Iruka to continue quickly. "And so, I need to make sure you're up to speed so you can make a good impression. Are you willing to train hard to become Hokage one day?" The vigorous nod at mention of his dream seemed sincere. Iruka felt a little guilty using the child's aspirations as fuel for his passion, but if it got him motivated then there didn't seem to be any harm in it. The next month rivaled the first in its difficulties. Even though Iruka spent hours explaining and demonstrating the simplest jutsu, his protege couldn't seem to mold chakra correctly. As he was beginning to doubt that the boy could even become a ninja, the answer to his problems came in an unexpected manner. One uneventful afternoon when Iruka was attempting to explain the chakra control necessary to create a bunshine, Naruto threw his version of a tantrum, sighing loudly and falling into the grass on his back. Iruka Sensei, I can't concentrate like that. You said I just need to mold the chakra and stuff, but how? It's like trying to grab one tiny ant from a big group that's all running together." His frustrated noises quickly devolved into him simply grumbling on the ground. The statement struck Iruka with a flash of inspiration. However, it was just a theory, but he was willing to try anything at this point. For some reason Naruto had some otherworldly stamina, and it could be connected. After directing him to practice some hand seals, Iruka left to pay a visit to one of the most renowned ninjas in the village. Hatake Kakashi was in his usual spot, by a bridge in the northern part of the village, lounging in a tree and reading one of his adult-themed novels. "Kakashi-sama," he began, stopped immediately by a raised hand that waved almost dismissively thereafter. "Yo, Iruka-san. I've told you that there's no need to be so formal. And quat. He might be one of the most feared shinobi in the world, but he was also one of the most casual and least punctual. My apologies. I was taught to always respect my superiors," Iruka continued with a slight grin. It was hard to feel intimidated by Kakashi sometimes, although the questioning look from that one visible eye made him fidget a little. The mask over the Jonin's nose and mouth didn't help much either. "I came to ask a favor, if you're not too busy today. I've been trying to work with Naruto on some chakra control, but he can't seem to mold chakra as easily as other kids his age. After 3 weeks of instruction there hasn't been even a puff of wind to indicate a simple bunshine. Don't get me wrong, I don't expect any kid his age to be able to perform the bunshine no jutsu successfully, but most can make some ambiguous figure. And quat. He took a deep breath, realizing that he was speaking quickly due to a touch of anxiety. Kakashi, however, looked as impassive as always. "I think it's because Naruto has too much chakra, potentially many times the amount a 6-year-old should possess. I think it might have something to do with the QB. And quat." The last sentence was stated a bit more solemnly than the others, though his audience still failed to react. "I was hoping that you might be able to demonstrate a clone technique that consumes a greater amount of chakra. If my theory is correct, this could help him a great deal. And quat. A very long moment passed, during which Iruka tried not to quail under Kakashi's flat gaze. Finally, a curt nod indicated his agreement, although it seemed reluctant. The only higher-level Bunshine technique he could perform, without knowing his element, is the Cage Bunshine no Jutsu. But as a B-rank jutsu, you should know that there's no way he'll be able to do it, Kakashi cautioned as they made their way back to where Naruto was practicing. It seemed that Iruka was taking this boy's development seriously, something the Jonin had little to say about. I know, but I can't perform the technique, and it's just a hunch. And quat. It was a lame response, but it was all he had. Iruka remained silent for the remainder of the short walk, arriving to see Naruto still screwing up his face in concentration and holding his hands in an imitation of the tiger seal. Naruto, this is Hatake Kakashi. He is a Jonin that's mastered over 1,000 jutsu. And quat. That was bound to get his attention and respect. As anticipated, the blonde's eyes turned into saucers as he bowed like Iruka had taught him. Now, Kakashi-sama is going to explain a different jutsu to you, alright? Please give him your full attention. And quat. Excited nodding ensued. Kakashi began, dropping unceremoniously to the ground into a cross-legged position. The boy was more respectful than he had expected, at least. Well, Naruto-kun, this is a more advanced clone technique called Cage Bunshine no Jutsu. It takes a lot more chakra to use, and there's a different seal for it. And quat. As the legendary Jonin began explaining exactly how to perform the jutsu, Iruka gratefully noted that the man was treating Naruto like an adult, and more importantly like a real person. After Kakashi completed his explanation, following an energetic nod from the youngster, he agreed to demonstrate Cage Bunshine no Jutsu. And quat. In the blink of an eye and a puff of white smoke, there was another Hatake Kakashi was sitting next to the original, indistinguishable. What surprised Naruto the most was that the Bunshine started talking to him, rather than the real Kakashi. Now, the neat thing about this ability is that when you make a copy of yourself, it retains a portion of your consciousness. And quat. Naruto blinked at him, confused. Kakashi blinked back, not used to explaining things to children his age. It has a mind of its own. And quat. An attentive and excited nod ensured his message had been understood this time. Additionally, the two main benefits of the Cage Bunshine is that it can mold chakra just like you, and when it's destroyed you gain the memories the clone experienced. Do you understand? A very slow nod accompanied a look that said not really, but sort of. And a pause. Just give it a try, Naruto, Iruka encouraged. Naruto dropped into a cross-legged position, perhaps assuming that it was necessary since Kakashi had done so, and concentrated. The silver-haired man had said to use a funny hand seal where he crossed his index and middle fingers instead of the tiger seal used for a normal bunshine. After a few minor corrections to his hand positioning, he tried molding the chakra like Kakashi had said too. About 10 seconds later, as Iruka was about to open his mouth and express his concern, Naruto yelled at the top of his lungs, Cage Bunshine no Jutsu. If Naruto had been a Jonin performing the technique, it would have been fair to have a hearty laugh at the result. He was 6, however. Half of a square meter beside him had erupted in white smoke. Rather, it fizzled. A small and unrecognizable blob vaguely the color of his t-shirt and shorts had materialized, quivering for only a few seconds before going up in an alabaster mist. Naruto just sat staring at the spot, unable to fully process what had happened. Well, that was unexpected, Kakashi muttered, clearly surprised anything had happened at all. A glance up at Iruka showed a shocked but simultaneously satisfied expression. Naruto, that was great. Iruka's exuberance snapped Naruto from his momentary daze. But sensei, it didn't work, he responded, perplexed and disappointed. He had not been expecting much after his days of failure, but after seeing the plume of smoke his hopes had shot up. Oddly, it was Kakashi who responded first. Naruto, you need to understand that this is a pretty advanced jutsu. It's impressive that you managed to do anything with it at all. And quat. Iruka smiled appreciatively at his superior, knowing the effect that the other man's praise would have on a child that had only received it from one source prior. A broad, bashful grin spread across Naruto's face as he acknowledged the compliment with a bow, scratching at the back of his neck embarrassedly. Iruka was beginning to wonder if the boy had picked up that quirk from him. The rest of summer went by quickly. With chakra control worked out, in theory at least, the remainder was spent getting Naruto's basic taijutsu forms up to par and working with kunai and shuriken. It was incredible how eager he was to learn and train. On days Iruka was busy, Naruto would take it upon himself to practice, and often even on days his sensei was free he would begin and end far outside of the Chunin's availability. Before he knew it, Iruka was preparing for classes to begin in only a week's time. Naruto had finally removed his aviator goggles in favor of a simple indigo headband tied the style of a hit. His wardrobe had changed to consist primarily of gray t-shirts and beige cargo shorts that reached just past his knees. Iruka was sure his tastes would change as he grew older, but at least he had been able to pick his own clothes for once. Some encouragement had been offered to the shopkeepers, of course. The night before his first day of class, Naruto approached the man he had nearly called dad a few times now. Iruka Sensei? I know you're going to be my instructor for classes, but I don't want any special treatment, okay? There was a defiant spark in his eyes that Iruka would not forget any time soon. It reminded him a bit of the rebellious Naruto of the past, but spoke more of the young man standing before him now. He wanted to be the best ninja he could be, using only his own strength and determination. I promise I won't, Naruto. I know you'll excel on your own power. And quat. Furrowed brows communicated that his words hadn't quite registered. With a fond ruffle of the boy's hair, Iruka pulled him into a hug, the first time he had done so since welcoming the blonde to his home. Naruto froze momentarily, causing Iruka to quickly relax his hold and back off, thinking a boundary may have been crossed. However, a tight grip pulled him back, a few errant sniffs tugging a soft smile to the shinobi's lips. Minato, Kushina, tomorrow your son begins his journey to follow in your great footsteps. The first 3 weeks at the academy went as Iruka expected, even if they were a little disappointing. He had gotten his hopes up that things might be close to normal for Naruto now that he was attending classes nearly every day of the week, but it was not to be. Despite the nearly 2 months of remedial training they had done, the child was still noticeably behind the majority of his peers, struggling most with his ninjutsu studies. In taijutsu he fared a bit better, if only because he would tire out his opponent and gain the upper hand over the long run. The unnatural endurance and never-give-up attitude that Naruto had adopted proved frustrating for some of the prospective Junon to deal with sometimes, but that was the least of his worries. Iruka Sensei, none of my classmates want to talk to me, Naruto lamented one afternoon, kicking a stone along the road back to Iruka's home. The Chunin should have anticipated this, of course, but he had been so focused on making sure that the blonde had been ready for training that the social aspect had been largely overlooked. Of course Naruto would want to make friends, what 6-year-old did not? Only now did Iruka truly realize that the youth's ostracization had been passed on to his classmates by their parents. This would take some delicate explaining. That's not true, Iruka began lightly, ruffling Naruto's spiky blonde hair and eliciting an insincere scowl. I think the Hyuga girl would talk to you if you tried. And quat. It was difficult not to notice the way the insufferably shy brunette watched Naruto from her seat at the back of the class, a mix of genuine curiosity and infantile admiration evident in her opalescent, pupil-less eyes. Naruto had naturally taken to being overtly friendly and a bit loud in class, apparently destined to be the class clown in a way. Iruka could not really blame him, either. After years of simply being ignored and even openly despised, it was no wonder he began seeking attention in such ways. Who? He asked with a furrowed brow, trying to remember her from their class introductions. A minute or two of thinking brought him to the answer. Oh, Hinata-san? Isn't she the one with weird eyes and red face? And quat. Naruto, Iruka scolded, though the youth's observations were not entirely inaccurate. Hinata is a very nice girl, and her eyes are like that because of her family's bloodline ability. And quat. As he expected, Naruto's face appeared to be the epitome of confusion. Nobody had ever explained the concept to him before. Some people have what are called bloodline limits, he explained as they rounded a corner, adopting his lecturing tone. These are certain special abilities they inherit from their families that can't be learned by anybody else. Hinata possesses the Byakugan, which uses her eyes to and quat. He hesitated in his explanation, considering phrasing that the child would understand. It lets her see through things and at a much further distance than normal. She can also see the chakra inside of people. And quat. Saucer-like eyes stared up at him in rapt attention, fascinated by the concept. Uchiha Sasuke, another of your classmates, also comes from a family with a bloodline ability. The Sharingan is another one that uses your eyes, but it lets him copy a lot of jutsus just by seeing them, and can make him move faster. And quat. It was not a precise explanation, but one that would make sense. Sensei, that's not fair. Naruto had stopped and was looking up at him with a mix of chagrin and indignation. Why did they get special stuff like that? Iruka could see where the boy was coming from, so he was careful with a response. The last thing he wanted was Naruto holding a grudge or becoming upset with his classmates for something that they had no control over. The irony of such a situation would be tragic. They were just born into their families, Naruto. You can't be mad at them because of something outside of their own control. And just because they have those techniques doesn't mean they are automatically stronger. It takes more than just special skills to become a great ninja. And quat. Naruto looked a bit dubious but nodded. Iruka could see the gears turning, trying to decide what to do with the new information. I guess. Hey, do you think I should try to be their friends? He asked hopefully, the doubt already apparent in his voice. While the Hyuga girl seemed to hold no ill will towards Naruto, the Uchiha boy looked at him with at least a moderate amount of distaste. Leave it to the Uchihas to indoctrinate their young with their own ignorance. I think that sounds great. And remember what I told you. It's up to you to make a good impression. Even if you think somebody doesn't like you, just show them how nice and hardworking you can be. I bet they'll come around. The jubilant smile and nod was priceless. As they walked the remaining distance back to his apartment, Iruka wondered if it was wrong to get Naruto's hopes up. Well, if he really wants to become Hokage one day, he needs to start changing minds. What better minds to change than those of his peers? Unfortunately, altering predispositions proved more difficult than Iruka had anticipated. Naruto did not give up on his in-your-face nigh constant exuberance, something that made some edge away from him. However, as Iruka observed the behavior of his student, it became increasingly apparent that the attitude was merely a front. Naruto was nervous around his peers, and rather than act aloof and reserved like some of his classmates, Aburame Shino, for example, he became extremely extroverted. In reality, the boy just did not know how to engage others in casual conversation, a skill that most youths his age unabashedly possessed and acted on. Months passed with little to show in terms of improvements, at least in the social realm. Naruto possessed a surprising amount of motivation despite his situation, something Iruka supposed he would have needed to have in order to survive that long in the village. Unable to form connections with his classmates, the blonde took his unspoken frustration out on training. Logically considered, social skills were entirely foreign and a pain to learn for a youth that had basically raised himself. Exercise and self-instruction were an escape of sorts, leading to spending many extra hours honing his skills, gradually closing the gap that still existed between his fellow students. Up early again, I see, Iruka observed with a yawn one morning in early December. Recently Naruto had been getting up even earlier than his teacher to do some light physical exercise. This was the third time in a week Iruka had woken up to find his student doing push-ups on the living room floor. It was impossible to argue that training so much was not admirable, but it was not the discipline that worried him. The longer he failed to form friendships with his classmates, the more at risk he was of becoming isolated, eventually sinking into himself entirely. Many of the children in Naruto's class had already formed cliques, something unavoidable for youths, and the longer this persisted the harder it would get. An abuse of power was in order. "All right students, quiet down please," Iruka chided over the dull roar. It was the last day of classes before the brief winter break, and the last few minutes of class at that. Nearly everyone was buzzing with excitement. "Now I still expect you all to train during your breaks." And quat. A familiar chorus of grumbles greeted his announcement, and he could not help but grin slightly. "Come on now, you can't expect to graduate and become great ninja if you don't practice a lot. That aside, I want you all to be aware that you will have new seating assignments when we resume classes next month." And quat. The complaining began almost immediately, but he merely held up a hand for silence and continued. Quiet down. If you want to sit next to somebody in particular, write down your requests on a piece of paper and hand it to me as you leave. I won't make any promises, but I will do my best to respect your wishes. Remember, only 3 people can sit together in a row, and this is a full class of 27 students. You have to sit somewhere next to 1 or 2 of your classmates. And quat. With that, he waited as most of the children hurriedly scribbled a name or two on a scrap of paper before being dismissed. As expected, Naruto shrugged and walked out first without placing a request. Both the Haruno girl, Sakura, and Inoiki's daughter Ino put in bids for Sasuke, who had managed to gain popularity on his looks and exceptional skills alone. To be fair, the child did seem to work hard to be like his brother Itachi. However, Sasuke seemed not to mind who he was put with and left in the same manner Naruto had. The very last person to leave was Hinata, the diminutive heiress to the Hyuga family, approaching bashfully with a tiny scrap of paper clutched to her chest. Iruka smiled encouragingly, which only proved to deepen the blush spreading across the girl's cheeks. In a rush she bowed and thrust the scrap atop the pile, almost running out of the room immediately thereafter. Iruka shook his head with a knowing smile, shuffling the papers together before picking the top one off to read the small, eloquent, and incredibly formal script. Hyuga Hinata requests to be seated next to Uzumaki Naruto. And quat. It would not be until some time later that Iruka realized the incredible courage it had taken the young Hyuga to have even put forth her request, but he gladly abided by it. He felt a pang of guilt at manipulating the classroom environment in Naruto's favor, but quickly quashed the feeling after considering the advantages the rest of his students had obtained through a normal upbringing. A promise had been made not to give Naruto any special treatment, but he had taken that in terms of academic assistance and, probably, not embarrassing the boy. Iruka was doing what any parent might do for their child. He cared about Naruto's development, and knew that having even 1 or 2 friends would help tremendously. He only hoped he had chosen the right ones to bet on. As the class filed into the room on their first day of the spring semester, they automatically moved to their old seats, either in hopes that their teacher had forgotten to assign them or in genuine forgetfulness. "Everybody to the front of the class, please," he interrupted as the last student filed in. Well, last 2 if you count the small white dog perched on his head. Kiba appeared to have inherited the Inuzuka clan's traits. "It's time to get your new seats for this semester." And quat. The expected groans came and went as the students moved sullenly to the front of the class. The assignments appeared to largely follow the groups everybody had been sitting in originally, with some changes here or there. Choji, Shikamaru, and Ino were all put at a table together as per their parents' request. They got along pretty well anyway, despite Ino's dismay at not being placed next to Sasuke. Shino, Kiba, and Sakura were placed in a row, the familiar whine from the pink-haired girl echoing her blonde friend. Over half of the class had been placed before. Without missing a beat, Iruka announced it. Moving on to the last set of seats near the window, starting in the back row, Uchiha Sasuke, Hyuga Hinata, and Uzumaki Naruto. Please take your seats. Next row. And quat. As Iruka continued, the three blinking children failed to move for a moment, glancing at one another before the boy with ebony tresses shrugged and sauntered up to take the window seat. Naruto watched after him for only a moment before smiling a little nervously at Hinata, who looked down quickly, face flushed and index fingers pushing together so hard the ends turned white. Not wanting to hold up the rest of the students looking to get to their seats, he trotted quickly up to take a seat next to Sasuke, the last of the trio taking her seat quietly after the blonde. The rest of the seating finished without a hitch, although the slightest of frowns twitched at Iruka's lips as he noted the state of that certain back row. The Uchiha boy sat staring out the window, not really trying to be rude but just more interested in whatever the outside world had to offer at the moment. Naruto was uncharacteristically quiet, hands in his lap and just looking around the room anxiously. Hinata did what Hinata usually did, although with a lot more color in her face than normal. She sat there, fidgeting ever so slightly, trying to appear as small as possible as if her presence might cause some huge inconvenience. Well, I didn't expect them to hit it off immediately. I just hope I did the right thing. About a week later the first spark appeared. Up until that point the three had not spoken much beyond necessary collaborative classwork. Today was a team sparring match, where the class would split into groups of 3 and have multiple tag team matches against the rest of their peers. The rules were simple. Your group would choose a first opponent who would fight until knocked down, or until 3 points were scored against them, and then the next person would take their place and continue. Matches would occur one at a time in a round-robin style. The last team standing won bragging rights until the next tournament. To Iruka's relief, Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke gravitated together almost immediately. It was to be expected. The entire class, as a matter of fact, simply did the comfortable thing and formed groups according to their assigned rows. After a moment of each of them looking at one another several times, Hinata more at the ground than any one of them, Naruto finally spoke up. Well, who wants to go first ? And quat. It should be somebody who can last longest, I think, Sasuke offered thoughtfully, explaining the reasoning he had come up with. If one person can get through a lot of the teams by themselves, the other 2 will have a better chance with fewer people to fight, right? The Hyuga girl nodded in agreement before looking back down to the ground, tinges of pink visible already. Naruto considered the proposal and shrugged. Well, Iruka Sensei always says I have a lot of stamina or endurance or something. I can go first. And quat. The blonde had placed both hands behind his head, looking a bit embarrassed at the admission. Sasuke only nodded, Hinata mimicking his action and looking like she wanted to say something, but the words failed to escape. Alright, Naruto exclaimed boisterously, feigned confidence returning as their teacher set up the first matches. Iruka was surprised at his students' abilities, to say the least. It seemed some had taken his request seriously and worked on their taijutsu over the break, showing marked improvement from their last group sparring sessions. A streak of pride shone through at Naruto's performance, the dedication the boy had shown proven as he went through his first matches. Before long it was clear which 3 teams would prevail. Aside from Naruto's team, the team consisting of Shino, Kiba, and Sakura was still standing with only Shino having been beaten. Additionally Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji still stood in the ranks, the Nara boy currently fighting for his team with Choji in the last slot. Naruto seemed to be breathing a bit heavily for once, which was not too surprising as he had persevered through a slew of opponents with several close calls. At one point he had been down 2 points to 0 against Shino, but held him off long enough to land a well-timed kick that took the bug user off of his feet. Close one, Sasuke had murmured, though seemed to have a growing respect for his comrade's abilities. Finally, it was Naruto's turn again, this time against Kiba. The Inuzuka boy had proven to be well adept at hand-to-hand combat, and it was almost immediately apparent who had the upper hand in their bout. Faster than he would have liked, Naruto was against the ropes, forced to spend most of his efforts defending and hardly getting the chance to go on the offensive. Had he been less exhausted the encounter might have been more even. However, the score was 2-1 in Kiba's favor, and things did not look good for him. And Naruto-kun. And quat, a timid voice began, almost causing him to miss a block. Hinata almost never spoke unless spoken to, and even then usually a nod or quick shake of the head communicated what she needed to. Not to mention, the honorific being so personal threw him off a little. Remember we're here too. And what? She trailed off, no doubt hoping her encouragement had not come off negatively. Sasuke, however, nodded and voiced his agreement. Naruto smirked. He knew that, of course, but he was not about to give up on his team. The more he could get out the better chance they had to win. I know, he grunted through an outside block, quickly pivoting to avoid a round kick aimed at his side. But we're gonna win. The opportunity came unexpectedly as Kiba lunged for a hook, letting his guard down on the opposite side. Naruto took the gamble, moving directly in the path of the blow and launching his own uppercut in response. The effect was almost as desired. With a simultaneous oomph, both boys were knocked off of their feet, Kiba landing on his rear end while Naruto ended up flat on his back with a throbbing eye. Despite the injury, he had the broadest grin on his face following a bark of laughter that could have made Akamaru, Kiba's dog, jealous. Hey, oops, guess it's up to you guys now. And quat. Iruka smiled, watching as his charge was helped to his feet by a concerned, flushed Hinata and a fairly impressed Sasuke. So it begins. Sasuke opted to fight next, apologizing to Hinata a bit cockily. Sorry you didn't get to fight today, Hinata-san, he said emphatically, stepping up to the sparring circle. The implication was not lost on the remaining students, instantly riled up by the brazen Uchiha. Despite the confidence, even Sasuke would later admit, begrudgingly, that he had underestimated his opponents, namely Shikamaru. As his first opponent, the Uchiha quickly learned the lesson that appearances were deceiving. Shikamaru slept a lot, even in class, and expressed how everything seemed to be troublesome and opos. However, his taijutsu was nothing to scoff at, and before long the score was tied at 2. Both youths had been moving in a veritable frenzy, at least for their ages. Shikamaru was noticeably more exhausted than his adversary, and just before they re-engaged for what could have been the final time, he straightened and held up a hand. This is too troublesome. You win. And quat. Without a further explanation, he shoved his hands in his pockets and trudged back to his team. Sasuke blinked once or twice, but nodded and readied himself. Sakura's performance was dismal, to put it lightly. It was apparent that the girl had put little effort in her physical training, or at least not at all in her forms. She also seemed unable to concentrate against the boy that she always fawned over. In less than 30 seconds Sasuke had handily scored his 3 points without having been touched, and it seemed he had used the match as a breather from the last one. Iruka noted that he had taken it easy, preferring to score easy points on her shoulders and side when he could easily have taken a rougher route. Nicer than I expected from an Uchiha. Alright Tubby, he sighed, motioning for Choji to come forward to be his last encounter. Let's get this over with. And quat. Shikamaru winced as Choji's eyes narrowed to slits. Hinata gulped as the air around them seemed to grow heavier. She muttered something incoherent about things that are not nice, eyes on the ground and fingers pressed together in worry. The rotund boy stepped forward, shoving his chips in Shikamaru's hand. You'll regret that. And quat. Choji, who was normally unreadable and somewhat timid, seemed deathly serious after the insult. Shikamaru quietly mentioned something about a taboo to Ino. Almost as soon as Iruka had signaled the match to start, several shocked gasps escaped the crowd. One moment Sasuke was facing Choji, and the next he was sprawled on the ground with the wind knocked out of him, an angry Akimichi glaring down at him. I'm not fat, you jerk. I'm just big boned. And quat. Ino giggled and cheered for the unexpected victory, though she was fuming immediately after at her teammate for being so harsh with Sasuke. Sasuke returned to his group, shaking his head and looking depressed. Sorry. I guess I wasn't ready for that. And quat. He made a mental note to never call Choji fat again. Iruka almost let a grin slip. It was good to see the proud boy humbled a bit. That's alright Sasuke-san, you did great. Ready to clean up, Hinata-san? The Hyuga looked mortified, shaking her head and backing up, which only caused Naruto to cock his head to the side and give her a quizzical look. Come on, I know you'll do great. Just give it your best shot. A squeak escaped her mouth and she jumped in response to Naruto grabbing her hand and pulling her back towards the circle. His big, encouraging smile gave her confidence, something that was entirely foreign to the heiress. She nodded slowly and took a few tentative steps to stand in front of Choji, who still looked more than mildly annoyed at the earlier quip from Sasuke. Begin. At Iruka's call, Choji moved into a basic taijutsu fighting stance before blinking at Hinata. It was well known that the Hyuga fought differently than most ninja, using the Juken style that was developed for their bloodline ability. Even with that knowledge, without having seen it before, her stance looked weird. As soon as the girl had lowered into her stance, the timidity washed away to reveal a focused youth, no doubt years into her special taijutsu training already. The light flush remained, but Hinata was all business, determined not to let her team down. The sight of his quiet classmate suddenly looking fierce took the anger out of Choji. He gulped, not sure what to think. His time for thinking was quickly over when a barrage of palm strikes from the diminutive Hinata rattled his guard, from the very beginning just struggling to keep up with her pace. Naruto and Sasuke sat gawking a few meters back, wondering why they had only seen basic taijutsu from their classmate up until that point. The match was decided faster than Sasuke's bout with Sakura, concluding with a tumult of applause and excited shouts from the rest of the students. Choji bowed and shuffled back to his team, apologizing several times to them and looking crestfallen. Hinata immediately bowed and scurried back into the crowd to rejoin her team. Her face was burning with the praise coming from every direction. No amount of stuttering insistence that she did not deserve it helped until Iruka came to her rescue. Alright everyone, good work today. We had this exercise so that you all could find some of your own strengths and weaknesses, and maybe learn a little teamwork along the way. I want you all to work hard on your taijutsu. I'll be disappointed if we don't have a different winning team every week. With a chorus of yes sensei. They all made their way back to the classroom, everyone chirping about the winning team and how cool it was to watch the last few fights. Way to go you guys. Naruto beamed as they got back to their seats, excitement nearly bubbling over. His teammates were not the only ones that noticed that he was no longer breathing hard. Sasuke, you kicked Shikamaru's ass, but I mean, he corrected at Hinata's wide eyes. He offered a bashful laugh before continuing. And Hinata, your taijutsu was so cool. Is that your family's fighting style? A subdued nod preceded a quiet statement, accompanied by the seemingly ever-present index fingers. Anyo. I only had one match, Naruto-kun. You and Sasuke-san did all the work. And what? I barely did anything, Sasuke admitted begrudgingly, smirking at Naruto. You're the one who fought the rest of the class. How many matches was it? 8? 10? Iruka Sensei was right. You don't ever get tired, do you? Hinata nodded vigorously. It wasn't that bad, he said proudly, catching Iruka's stern look before making a face and lowering his voice. I mean, I got to go against all of the ones who didn't do their winter homework, I'm sure. I bet if I'd fought Kiba, Shikamaru, or Choji early on you guys would have done a lot more matches. And quat. Sasuke shrugged, and Hinata looked inexplicably worried. It was true, to a degree. Alright, that's it for today. Be sure to start practicing your transformation jutsu at home. It's one of the 3 important jutsus you need to know before you can graduate. And quat. Naruto made a face. He never had much luck with jutsus, and had made little to no progress on the Cage Bunshine technique despite almost daily practice. Hinata-san, do you want to train a little after class? I want to spar a bit more since we didn't get much chance with today's competition. And quat. Sasuke had turned to Hinata to pose the question as the class began to leave, leaving a blinking Naruto between them. The received response was an odd, wide-eyed wonder from the Hyuga, though a quick nod afforded her confirmation. Naruto smiled and waved to the two of them, moving along before a hesitant voice stopped him. And Naruto-kun. Do you want to come with us? Hinata asked nervously, eyes cast anywhere but at him. If you're too tired it's okay. And quat. She turned scarlet as she finally caught sight of the blonde, who was grinning from ear to ear. Yeah, I just need to tell Iruka Sensei. I'll meet you guys in the yard in 5 minutes. He could barely contain himself as he bounded down the stairs between desks, all but exclaiming to their teacher his plans for the afternoon. Of course, the Chunin had no qualms, so long as he was back for their evening meal. Moments later Naruto sped out the door, slowing to a casual walk with a bit too much bounce in his step upon leaving the building. Iruka leaned against his desk at the front of the class, head shaking and smiling sadly. A lot had happened in one day, it seemed, and not all of it good even if the children all seemed happy. The intended 3 had indeed formed the beginnings of a friendship, he felt, and Naruto could not have been happier. Sasuke seemed to have re-evaluated the boy too, and also learned a valuable lesson on humility. Hinata, though, despite her team's confidence and insistence that she fought well, seemed as down on herself as always, as if nothing she did was good enough. For whom it was inadequate was a mystery, though Iruka had a few guesses. It was no secret that her father Hiyashi was an icy, intimidating, perfectionist of a man, and her mother had died years prior. The girl was riddled with the signs of anxiety, lack of confidence, and self-deprecation. Well, I can hope her new friends will help in ways I can't. I'll have to wait and see. When Naruto returned that evening for dinner he was bubbling over, talking almost non-stop about how the extracurricular sparring had gone. By his account Sasuke was better than he was in all categories, and Hinata was a lot faster at least, but rather than becoming disheartened these facts seemed to encourage him to train even harder. His incredible stamina did not even seem to come to mind as a great advantage he had over the other two. Somewhere in the last 7 months Naruto had learned the all-important ability to be humble. Iruka wondered wryly where he could have gotten that from, stopping himself from seething about the boy's lack of proper upbringing. All it took was something small, and he's come so far in such a short time. We're gonna train every day after classes, and even on off days, Naruto exclaimed, flushing slightly at Iruka's chiding for being too loud indoors before continuing. Sorry sensei, but Sasuke showed me this cool fire jutsu, and Hinata can already do a perfect transformation. Can we work more on my chakra stuff and ninjutsu? Iruka blinked, but grinned. It seemed they were already inspiring one another. Of course we can, Naruto. You want to set a goal for yourself? His student stopped mid-bite and furrowed his brows in the usual manner, denoting he did not quite understand. Naruto, your biggest goal is to be Hokage one day, right? He waited for a nod before continuing. Well, it's important to set little goals along the way that will help you get there. For example, you have to be a Jonin to be Hokage, but before that you have to be a Chunin, my rank, and even before that you have to make Shinan. So your first smaller goal should be to be a Shinan, right? Naruto nodded slowly this time, connecting the dots in his head. In order to become a Shinan, you have to master a few simple ninjutsus, have adequate ability with taijutsu, and be able to handle your ninja tools well. So when I asked if you wanted to set a goal, I mean a goal that will help you towards one of those smaller things, because eventually your goals will build up until you reach your big goal. And quad. With all the pieces put in place, a final excited nod indicated that he had understood everything up to that point. So I think we should work really hard and see if you can get your cage bunshine technique by the end of the year. How does that sound? And quad. A whole year? Iruka Sensei, do you really think it will take that long? Relatively speaking, a year of Naruto's life was a significantly larger portion of his entire existence than it was for Iruka, so the skepticism was understood. The youth likely neglected to consider how difficult the jutsu actually was to master. Yes, a whole year. Remember when I told you that you have a lot more chakra than most people? Naruto nodded, recalling also that Iruka had said not to mention it to anybody. Well, it's making it harder for you to focus on your ninjutsu because there's so much. So it might take longer for you to get used to some things. Does that make sense? The blonde sure liked nodding. Great, so let's aim for December, alright? See if you can learn it before Hinata-chan's birthday. Naruto made a face and asked a question about why exactly Iruka had added the suffix chan to his classmate's name. The older male was reminded daily how, while Naruto had picked up most of his language habits and meanings from the orphanage, some things had gone uncovered. The remainder of the meal was encompassed by a pseudo-lecture about honorifics, when to use them, and how to use them. A month had passed since that day, and sure enough the trio trained almost daily, further honing their taijutsu skills and occasionally finding time for chakra exercises. Naruto had advanced alarmingly fast in his taijutsu, to the point that Sasuke was now struggling to keep up and he was helping his friends with their footwork and technique. Of course even just sparring with Naruto over an extended period of time increased their endurance as well. Hinata helped both of them with their chakra control and its practical applications, to the best of her abilities, while Sasuke tried to impart some knowledge of the jutsus his brother had taught him. All in all, the experience helped all of them improve noticeably. Trouble came, however, as trouble always tends to. 2 months before the end of the spring semester, Hinata arrived home after a productive day at the academy. The Hyuga estate was vast and lavish, as the family was one of the wealthiest in the village, but the gardens could not hold the girl's attention for the time being. Her father had sent for her. The only thing going through her mind right then was a mental checklist, making sure she was presentable and had a stutter-free explanation of the day's events ready in case he asked. Not because he cared if she enjoyed it or not, such things were unimportant, after all, but to ensure that her instruction was going well. Hinata had been a disappointment to her father, a fact that she was reminded of almost daily at her home. If not by her father, then by her elder cousin Neji, or even her younger sister Hanabi, who showed much more promise. The elder daughter of Hiashi was on the verge of being disowned, or perhaps she had already been proverbially cast out. It was hard to tell some days. All Hinata knew was that she needed to work harder and earn her father's praise. It was her fault for being a failure, so she had to take responsibility and fix it. The audience chamber was dimly lit and quiet. Too quiet, as usual. Hyuga Hiashi sat on a slightly raised dais, considering his eldest offspring coldly. No hint of paternal warmth emanated from the leader of the clan. I understand that you are engaging in extra training after hours at the academy, he stated rhetorically, watching his daughter for any hint of a reaction. Nothing yet. I have been told you are training with an Uchiha. I approve of this choice and recommend you continue. Their clan is strong, and with his help you may yet salvage your worth. And quad. A pitiful, hopeful expression appeared on Hinata's face before it was erased by a hard look. However, I also understand that the Uzumaki child is also taking part in this training. I thought I had cautioned you about him. He is dangerous filth, and I have told you more than once to maintain distance from him. But you have gone against my wishes and now willingly consort with him. And quad. Hinata's mouth opened and closed once, causing Hiashi to raise an inquisitive eyebrow. Had she actually been about to defend her actions? You are not to spend any more time with Uzumaki Naruto. Do you understand? A long moment passed with a barely noticeable shimmering of the girl's eyes, the only animation to an otherwise stoic face. I will ask only once more, Hinata. Do you understand? His words cut like no blade could, finally eliciting a tight nod from her before she was dismissed unceremoniously. Hinata was used to tears. Many evenings had been spent curled up in her room, crying for reasons beyond her own understanding. But she knew why this time. She knew that her father had demanded she give up one of the only friends she had ever made, a boy that inspired her and whom she could gain confidence from, even if only once in a while. But why? Why did the adults hate Naruto so much? Why did even her peers whisper things about him like the older villagers? She had asked only 2 people in her life. One was her father, who had merely berated her for asking such a foolish question. The other was one of her retainers, who kindly suggested that he was not allowed to tell. That was what bothered the young Hyuga more than anything else. They were not allowed to, but that meant it must be a secret. What kind of secret could it be that was worth trying to put down such a courageous boy? Silent sobs carried her to sleep as the puzzle refused to solve itself in her mind. Naruto, why hasn't Hinata been training with you and Sasuke? Iruka asked on night when Naruto came home and began explaining what he and Sasuke had been working on. All I've heard mention of this last month was training with Sasuke, and every time I ask about Hinata you just say she's busy. What happened? Naruto questioned Markenquat. I don't know sensei, he answered honestly with a shrug, though his expression denoted he was bothered by it. She doesn't talk much in class anymore either, not that she used to much. Or that we talk in class. But one day she just said her dad wants her to train with him after school instead. I mean that seems pretty neat. Her Jukin is really cool. And quat. The mixed emotion in his statements was more than obvious. On one hand he wanted his friend back, but on the other he could not be mad that she was spending time with her dad training. You said she isn't talking as much in class? Iruka had put his chopsticks down, hands folding beneath his chin. Naruto nodded guiltily, thinking he was mad about them carrying on conversations in class. I see, well, I'm sure she'll be back with you and Sasuke soon. And quat. Naruto looked curious but nodded, unconvinced. The next day, after class, Iruka called Sasuke and Hinata to his desk before they were able to leave the classroom. Can you wait in the courtyard, Naruto? See if you can do 200 push-ups before Sasuke gets there. And quat. The challenge was taken to with gusto, the blonde racing from the room to begin immediately. A fond smile lingered on Iruka's lips for a moment before he turned to the pair in front of him, one looking curious while the other fidgeted nervously, staring at the floor. What have your parents told you about Uzumaki Naruto? Hinata's face shot up in alarm, all but confirming the Chunin's suspicions, though it was Sasuke who offered an explanation first. My dad said to avoid him, he answered with an uncomfortable shrug. He won't say why, but he said that Naruto is dangerous. Itachi said not to worry about it though, so I didn't listen. I haven't seen anything wrong with Naruto, and he's fun to train with. And quat. Iruka's nod, more appreciative than the child knew, brought about another shrug from Sasuke. My father has not said anything about Naruto-kun. Iruka Sensei, she mumbled at the ground, fingers grasping the hem of her shirt tight enough to make her fingers white. Hinata was exceptional at telling white lies with a straight face in most situations, but when caught in the open like this it was impossible to keep the emotion out. Thank you, Sasuke. You can go meet up with Naruto now. And quat. With a nod and glance to his friend, the Uchiha boy left silently. Iruka considered Hinata for a few long seconds, carefully choosing his phrasing. Hinata, you don't have to tell me, but I think it's safe to assume that your father has told you something similar. And quat. Her grip tightened. There's not much I can do for you. I know, like Sasuke, you don't want to have to be separated from your friends. And quat. The slightest of nods told him that she acknowledged that much. I also don't know what it's like for you at home, and unfortunately it's not my place to ask. However, he paused, finally seeing her slightly teary eyes raised to his. I can assure you that Naruto is not dangerous. He is a kind, determined boy that doesn't deserve what Konoha has forced on him. Understand? Hinata nodded with more fierceness than he knew she possessed. All right, he said quietly, smiling sadly at her. I'll see you tomorrow then. And quat. She bowed and left in a hurry. Only after a full minute of watching the empty doorway did Iruka notice the tiny drops of blood dripping from his fingers. He had apparently been holding his wrist very firmly behind his back. What is it you wanted to speak about, Umino Iruka? Hiyashi seated himself across from the instructor, not bothering to keep the distaste out of his voice. My daughter's performance has been above average, I assume? And quat. Yes, Hiyashi-sama, Iruka began carefully, trying to put the powerful man at ease. Hinata's grades are the best of her class, as one should expect of a member of the Hyuga family. And quat. This earned him a hard look from Hiyashi, followed closely by a curt nod. However, her grades are not why I asked you here. I have noticed that she has become more withdrawn in the last month or so, more so than usual. Early this semester she seemed to get along well with Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto, but lately seems to have abandoned their friendship, so to speak. And quat. As expected, Hiyashi showed little reaction beyond a twitch of his eyebrow at the mention of the village pariah. I told my daughter to stay away from the boy. The Uchiha clan does not remember what happened nearly 8 years ago, it seems. A pity. I encouraged Hinata to train with Sasuke, but his association with the demon has prevented that. It took all of Iruka's self-control to maintain a straight face and not grind his teeth. I see. Well, Hiyashi-sama, I think that is regrettable. Naruto was helping your daughter with her stamina and chakra capacity, in addition to simply serving as a sparring partner for her to practice Juken. And, I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that Naruto is a demon. He finished the last portion in a rush, doing his best to keep every shred of anger from his tone. Iruka Sensei, Hiyashi began frostily, blank eyes seeming to stare into the instructor's soul. Have you also forgotten the Kyubi no Kitsune, the incarnation of evil itself that ravaged this village? Have you forgotten the thousands that died at its claws, including your own parents? Iruka was proud of himself for not even flinching at the topic he had seen coming. Uzumaki Naruto possesses that very demon and should have been killed the same night it was sealed inside of him. No, Iruka began, unable to keep a semblance of fury from his voice. No, Hiyashi-sama, Naruto is not the Kyubi. The Yondaime sacrificed his life to seal that damn fox inside of him. Naruto never once had a choice in the matter. Even so, he does not possess the demon as you imply. He keeps it imprisoned, and as far as I am concerned he will until the day he dies. The Kyubi does not define who the boy is, he does, through his words and actions. And I can tell you from experience that Uzumaki Naruto is one of the kindest, most selfless children I know, and despite dealing with the whole village's spite his entire life he is still determined to protect them. Does that sound like a monster to you, Hiyashi-sama? Silence. Iruka was unsure whether Hiyashi was in shock at being rebuked, or if he was merely considering the words of the considerably younger Chunin. Likely the prior. It was a sobering thought, considering that the Hyuga clan head had significant sway over the village, to the point he could probably get Iruka removed from his post. An eternity seemed to pass before Hiyashi stood without saying a word, approaching the door to the small office. He turned at the threshold, looking back towards what he considered to be an impudent teacher. Let us hope you are right, for all our sakes. With that he was gone, and Iruka was left to sag heavily in his seat. Hiyashi's killer intent had been more than palpable. It had radiated violently throughout the room and likely several meters past. It had left the Chunin drained and shaking slightly, but he had gotten his point across. He could hope, at least. The next day at Academy, Iruka was struck speechless, stiffening as Hinata entered the room. He hoped against hope that nobody could sense the unbridled fury building up inside, although it seemed a few nearby students sensed the unbelievably rare pressure of his killer intent. A slew of unreasonable, borderline insane thoughts rushed through his mind. I will kill Hyuga Hiyashi. When the Hokage hears about this he'll. Hinata was slouched, which in and of itself was unsettling considering her normal poise. Although her face was downcast as per usual, Iruka had made out bruises along her neck and cheeks. From the way she was moving it could be assumed the injuries were more extensive than that. Hinata, he stated tightly, though quietly. The girl winced and turned to him wearily. Come with me please. She looked apprehensive, but far too sullen to put up any fight. It was an exercise in temperance to say nothing of her condition. He had seen her come in with bruises before and even asked about them once. He had been assured that they were the result of rigorous training with her father. I'm sure they were. I'm damn sure. A trip to the resident nurse did not take long. Although they covered most of her small body, the bruises and sores were minor enough to be treated with rudimentary healing techniques in short order. The very worst part was that neither Iruka nor the kindly woman treating Hinata could pry about the wounds. It was clan business, and as such was outside of even the Hokage's rule. It was physical abuse, plain and simple, disguised as training. The girl said nothing throughout the ordeal. When they returned to class, a few minutes past the scheduled start time, Hinata still looked tired, but at least stood straighter and was no longer in physical pain. The psychological pain. Iruka could only shake his head as he watched her walk up to her seat. That sort of pain doesn't heal the same. The Hyuga girl seemed a bit different that day. Despite the obvious mistreatment the night prior, she appeared to smile more, talk more with Naruto and Sasuke, and slowly seem like her old self. It was not until Naruto burst into the kitchen that evening, breathless, that Iruka discovered the reason. Hinata's back. You were right, sensei. It made sense in the most painful way. Hiyashi had likely gone home that night after speaking to Iruka and taken out his frustration on his daughter. But, at the same time, what the Chunin had said could not be refuted by a logical mind. Naruto had undoubtedly been helping his daughter in her training, and even he would have to concede that assuming the boy to be equivalent to his prisoner was absurd. Iruka ground his teeth again, tears springing to his eyes unbidden as he pulled Naruto into a spontaneous embrace. Good. Naruto? He asked breathily, trying not to sound as emotional as he felt. There was an indistinguishable sound that noted he was being listened to. Take care of your friends, especially Hinata. Good friends are hard to come by, and you should treasure them. I will, Iruka Sensei, Naruto responded, sounding confused but sincere. Naruto understood a lot about pain and loneliness. Iruka knew. In the future, when he better understood his friend's situation, he would need that experience to be there for her. Damn it, somebody needs to be. Iruka stretched and leaned back in his chair, eyes half lidded as he watched his 3 students spar in the summer heat. It had been a month already since the end of the spring semester, but Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke still spent most days together. Most of the time they trained, but occasionally they simply played games or chatted on walks. Ever since Hinata had returned to the group, they seemed more determined than ever to improve, as if her presence had revitalized their efforts. Despite the heat, they showed little to no lack of focus. Naruto and Hinata were sparring at the moment, allowing Sasuke a breather on a nearby bench. Both boys had long since removed their shirts, an action met with furious blushing by their female companion, and were covered in sweat. Her clothes clung to her as well, and she lost her focus to a giggle thinking about what it would be like to be a boy. Iruka, unseen by the group, raised an eyebrow. Hinata had laughed. Naruto took the opening presented and scored a point through her block, though his control had improved enough so that the blow was little more than a tap. Yeah. First point I've scored on you today, Naruto laughed as he settled back into his stance. Hinata's Juken had not only improved in the last few months, but she had also taken to modifying the style on her own. While the Hyuga Taijutsu largely focused on rapid palm strikes, Hinata had begun incorporating more kicks and advanced footwork into the style as a result of the boys' sparring. The result, for the time being, had proven her temporarily superior to her sparring partners until they were able to figure out effective counters. Hinata nodded excitedly, glad for her friend's progress. She was far too nice to ruin his accomplishment by admitting she had lost focus. About 10 minutes later found her sufficiently tired. Naruto had managed to score 2 more points since his first, though he had taken a significant amount more than she. Seeing Sasuke looking a bit down on energy still, Naruto straightened and stretched. You guys want to go to Ichiraku for lunch? Iruka Sensei took me there last week and their ramen is great. Sasuke and Hinata agreed readily, both tired and needing a lengthy break anyway. Naruto prattled on about the different types of ramen he was planning to get as they moved away, leaving a grinning Iruka watching after them. Naruto had taken his mentor's words seriously. Whenever his friends were tired he would find an excuse to rest, whether it be for lunch or just lying in the grass for a while. Iruka was sure that Sasuke and Hinata knew he was just being nice. It was hard to miss how Naruto always seemed full of energy, or how his heart rate returned to normal after only a moment's rest. But the blonde boy just wanted to make sure his friends were alright, so he did not mind the necessary breaks. He did love ramen, after all. Unfortunately he still had yet to make progress on his cage bunshine technique. No matter how much Hinata worked with him or how often he practiced, Naruto could only form that small discolored, unstable blob. It was getting to the point that he was even getting frustrated with himself. In all things Naruto refused to give up, trying and trying until he got it. But now he had encountered an obstacle that seemed impassable. Or at least it seemed that way, until the day Iruka decided to come join them for some chakra control exercises. All 3 were sitting cross-legged side by side, hands held in the ram seal and focusing. Iruka strode across the field they had been training in, sitting across from them with a proud smile. None of them moved, not even to check who had approached. Iruka blinked. Their focus was impressive. Several minutes later Naruto finally opened his eyes and sighed in exasperation, falling back into the grass. This prompted Hinata and Sasuke to blink their eyes open, though they appeared not to mind that they had been interrupted. Don't worry Naruto, you'll get it one of these days, Sasuke assured, leaning back on his hands. Hinata nodded encouragingly. It seemed that, in the same way that Naruto encouraged them in their sparring and took care to give them plenty of rest, the other 2 encouraged him in the areas he was less adept. It worked better than Iruka could have hoped. Your friends are right, Naruto, Iruka confirmed, watching the 3 closely. I think I may have thought of a way to help you a little. Hinata, you were able to use your Byakugan, yes? The girl blushed but nodded, eyes traveling to the ground as if it was something to be embarrassed about. Excellent. Can you sit right across from Naruto, please? Iruka had been working on a theory for the last month or so, but without a Sharingan or Byakugan he could not confirm it. Naruto sat up and looked at his teacher dubiously, but shrugged and took up his cross-legged position, Hinata bashfully taking up a position in front of him. Hinata, he whispered as low as he could manage as Naruto began to focus, making sure only she was privy to his words. When you look at Naruto with your Byakugan, you might inquire. I know sensei, she breathed, and to his relief she did not seem put off. I looked a few times, to see if I could tell why. Iruka blinked, but nodded. Alright then, he said a little louder so that Naruto and Sasuke could hear as well. I want you to use your Byakugan and watch Naruto as he tries to use his jutsu, alright? The girl nodded and muttered Byakugan to activate her bloodline. The veins surround both eyes bulged, her blank white, pupil-less eyes also acquiring minute black lines that outlined what might be considered a pupil. Naruto, try the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Unquote. Yes sensei, he sighed, crossing his fingers and concentrating. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Unquote. A puff of smoke appeared beside him, revealing again the unrecognizable mound that disappeared quickly thereafter. AHG, sensei, I can't do it. Iruka put up his hand, turning to Hinata. Hinata, what did you see? Unquote. Not much, sensei, she admitted dismally, sound for all the world like she believed it was her fault. He just has so much chakra I can hardly tell if any of it moves. The only thing I saw was a little bit of red chakra, I think. Unquote. She silently berated herself for stuttering after making almost all the way through without. Iruka had been expecting the first answer, but was taken aback by the addition. Red chakra? Are you sure? Hinata nodded, looking frightened like she had gotten in trouble. Iruka shook his head. He would have to talk to the Sandaime about this. However, her insight had confirmed his suspicions. Now he just had to hope that he was correct. Alright, Naruto, I assume you're only trying to create one clone, right? Naruto nodded. Why would he try to create more? Try to create more than one, let's say. Try to make 3 and see what happens. Unquote. His protege looked perplexed but complied nonetheless, closing his eyes and forming the seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Unquote. It took a second longer than before, but sure enough 3 puffs of smoke appeared around the boy and... Well, that's certainly an improvement, I think, Sasuke offered dubiously, looking at the 3 clones and trying to figure out if his friend had succeeded or not. The Bunshin were recognizable now, but looked incredibly thin and pale, wilting to the ground quickly before vanishing in simultaneous puffs of smoke. Alright Naruto, I think I know what you need to work on now, Iruka said happily, unable to keep the grin from his face. Meanwhile the blonde was rubbing the back of his head, a mixture of pride and embarrassment evident. I want you to spend more time working on chakra control, but more specifically molding the smallest amount of chakra you can. Alright? Unquote. But sensei, why would I want to use so little? Iruka hesitated, glancing at Hinata and Sasuke, who were both looking up at him. Well, they already know about his massive chakra. May as well act like it's not a secret. For some reason you have way too much chakra, Naruto. I'm sure Hinata has said something about your enlarged chakra coils? She and Naruto nodded, though it was apparent that the blonde had no idea what that meant. Basically it means you can hold more chakra than most people. But because you have so much, it's harder to pull out little bits to do normal jutsus. If you practice molding small amounts of chakra, it will help your control for all jutsus. Understand? Naruto nodded again in a way that said he understood most of it at least. Good. I have to go to a meeting now, so I'll leave you 3 to practice. Unquote. With that Iruka waved and left, hoping his insight proved useful. As they got back to their exercises Hinata was distracted. She had seen Naruto's vast chakra reserves before and at first it had been shocking, but soon it was something she just accepted as part of him. The red chakra, however, had never been apparent until that day. As a matter of fact, it seemed to spark even more when Naruto created the 3 Bunshin. The Hyuga had not used her eyes too much outside of her own compound, but never had she seen chakra that was not blue even in the strongest ninja like her father. Maybe it has something to do with the secret. She pondered before refocusing her attention on molding chakra. What can I do for you, Iruka? The Sandaime sat back in his office chair, looking a bit older than usual. He smoked his favorite pipe steadily and wore a kindly expression. If Iruka had not known better and the Hokage had not been wearing the hat indicating his office, the old man might appear to be a simple grandfatherly figure. As everybody knew, this was not the case. Hokage-sama, Iruka began reverently with a bow, remaining standing as a sign of respect. I came to ask about a certain discovery concerning Uzumaki Naruto. Unquote. He tensed for a moment, but relaxed again upon seeing the Sandaime's smile. Ah, Naruto. I never got the chance to personally thank you for taking the boy in. I can see the difference it has made. The Yondaime would be overjoyed to know that the boy had been accepted, even if by one person. Unquote. The old man's smile faltered at the final mention, continuing after a thoughtful pause. What is this discovery? Unquote. Sir, Naruto has befriended Uchiha Sasuke and Hyuga Hinata. They've become training partners and are helping one another hone their skills. They get along really well and quote. He coughed and ducked his head, realizing he had gotten carried away. Hiruzen's smile indicated that he did not mind the information, although his expression darkened as Iruka continued. Hinata was using her Byakugan to monitor Naruto's chakra as he attempted the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A raised eyebrow prompted a brief explanation as to why the 7-year-old was attempting such an advanced technique before he was able to continue. She told me that there was red chakra present inside of Naruto. He finished in a breath, unable to keep the concern from edging into his tone. I was hoping that you might have some insight as to what it might be. I think you know as well as I what the likely cause is. Iruka, the Hokage sighed, massaging his temples and looking even older. Chakra in humans is blue. It is always blue, except in unnatural phenomena. As you are well aware, the Kyubi no Kitsune is an unnatural phenomenon. They sat in silence for a moment. Iruka had expected but hoped against the coming postulation, but it came nonetheless. The fourth invented the seal on Naruto himself. The 8 trigram seal is made to weaken, or loosen over time if you will, to allow the Kyubi's chakra to leak out. If it did not, it would eventually kill the boy. Noticing Iruka's mouth agape, the Sandaime smiled sadly. Don't worry, Iruka. He is in no danger of causing himself or anybody else harm. The Kyubi's chakra is volatile though. It will make it much harder for Naruto to perform most jutsus as he gets older. The fox's presence within Naruto had already increased his chakra levels to a high Chunin level, and with all of the additional training he has been doing, I would wager it has reached Jonin level now. Hinata says his coils look like Kakashi''s. This news caught the Hokage off guard and he caught himself staring. He had known the approximate effects of having the 9 tails sealed within the child, but he had not expected those results. I doubt he will be able to utilize such stores, Iruka continued, scratching and shaking his head in bewilderment. At least the Kyubi's presence has helped in some areas. Naruto recovers from injuries incredibly fast and has incredible stamina. I've seen him spar for 2 hours straight, and by the end he had no bruises or scrapes, and he recovered in minutes. I've never seen anything like it. Another sad smile from the Sandaime stopped him from going further. Let us hope the effects remain positive. I have faith in Naruto, and I know you do as well. Iruka turned a bit red but nodded. After an unrelated discussion concerning the academy, he was dismissed. For a time Hiruzen stared out the window of his office in the Hokage building, thin tendrils of smoke rising from his long pipe. Let us hope, and have faith. Before they knew it, classes had begun again. A few months passed uneventfully, though Naruto's marks in all subjects had improved dramatically. Sasuke and Hinata still had the best scores in the class, but after a long summer of training Naruto was catching up quickly. All three were unmatched in their taijutsu, though there were a few students that showed great promise. Kiba appeared to have been training as well, and even Sakura seemed to have done more work than expected on her taijutsu. Shikamaru had developed what Iruka called a lazy style of sparring, but it was surprisingly effective and kept his opponents guessing. What Shino lacked in power he made up for in speed and reach. Choji continued to be a timid boy, though if anybody mentioned his taboo he might be considered an unstoppable force. Ino seemed entirely unconcerned with taijutsu, preferring fawning over Sasuke when she was not working on her chakra control and ninjutsu. Iruka could not complain about that too much. It was important to stick with your strengths, so long as you had the basics down in all areas. Rankings seemed to change every week among the three friends. More often than not Sasuke came out on top. He had no chance of outlasting Naruto in a long match, so he had to either knock his friend down or score his points fast. When he failed to do either, Naruto claimed the top spot in their sparring for the day. Hinata was not far behind either, and even managed to win once or twice a week. Instead of pride in that accomplishment, however, she chastised herself for not doing better while simultaneously silently cheering the two boys on. Iruka noted that she did seem marginally less shy, but the ground still occupied most of her attention and her nervous habits had not disappeared. Shortly after Naruto's 8th birthday, in mid-October, everything changed. The news came to Iruka in the middle of the night via an Anbu agent knocking on his door. Naruto lay asleep, tired from a long day. Meet at the academy, room 201A. Leave Naruto here. With that brief message he was gone, vanishing like a wraith in the night. Iruka squinted at the moon worriedly, wondering if the reddish tint was just his imagination. He glanced back into his apartment before closing the door and leaping off the balcony towards the academy. Room 201A was an auditorium usually used for presentations. Now was no exception, as most of the instructors and many jonin and Anbu sat or stood around worriedly. Every one of them knew this was an emergency situation, but nobody yet knew why. Slowly, a shrouded figure made his way to the dimly lit podium, a trail of white smoke drifting behind him. The Hokage's voice was hard and racked with anguish, sadness, and rage all in one. His killer intent filled the room and sent shivers through even some of the Anbu. This was serious. Kana Hagakure Shinobi, he began formally, keeping the shaking from his voice. A few hours ago one of our Anbu agents entered the Uchiha compound to investigate a report of suspicious activity. Upon arrival, it was discovered that the entire Uchiha clan has been slaughtered. Unquote. The collective gasps almost outnumbered the disbelieving stares. Nobody could have managed such a thing. The Uchiha were a strong clan, many of their members possessing the Sharingan. There was but one group that might have been able to manage it, and even then. The culprit, the Sandaime continued, gripping the edge of the podium with such ferocity that the wood splintered around his fingers, is Uchiha Itachi. Unquote. Iruka's mind had gone blank at the announcement. The tragedy was horrific in and of itself, but Sasuke, one of Naruto's close friends. When Itachi's name fell, there were cries of outrage from the gathered audience, but Iruka could only stare, unable to come to terms with what he was hearing. This was not possible. It was not happening. It could not be. There was only one survivor, one we assumed was left out of pity or attachment. Uchiha Sasuke has been placed in protective custody with Ibiki and will be interviewed as soon as he is awake. Itachi is being placed in Konoha's bingo book as an S-rank missing nin as we speak. He is not to be trusted, and any and all information concerning him is to be surrendered to myself or Ibiki. That is all. Unquote. The Hokage turned sharply to slowly retreat into the shadows, tailed by several Anbu and his advisors. This is a nightmare. It's not happening. I'm going to go to sleep, wake up, and everything will be as it was before. God damn it, it's going to be the same. It was not the same. Iruka had not slept, unable to sink into slumber and instead boring a hole in the ceiling with his eyes. Hours passed before he heard the telltale grunts from the living room indicating that Naruto was up and exercising already. Naruto. Iruka did not want to get up. He wanted to lay there forever and sink into the earth. But it was his duty as Naruto's guardian to tell him. He could only pray that the boy. What? That he won't take it poorly? That he won't die inside? Yeah, right. The Chunin steeled himself and got up, walking slowly to the living room and standing tiredly by his student. Good morning, Iruka Sensei, Naruto said amiably between sit-ups, grinning ridiculously until he saw the expression on his teacher's face. Iruka looked hollow, empty, as if his soul had taken a vacation and forgotten to tell him. He was pale with dark circles under his eyes, and the usual light behind his eyes was nowhere to be seen. Sensei. What's wrong? Unquote. Sasuke. Unquote. His voice was hoarse, and he had to cough before continuing quietly, not able to look the child in his eyes. Sasuke's clan was wiped out last night. He was the only one who survived. Unquote. Silence. Naruto's face contorted, and for a moment Iruka was unsure whether the boy was bursting with righteous fury or unable to contain the overwhelming sadness. In the end it was both, as the blonde ended up with his arms wrapped about his legs with his head buried by his knees, doing his best not to cry but with silent sobs racking his small body. His nails, which seemed more jagged than normal, had dug into his legs and pierced the skin, spawning a few trickles of blood. Iruka fell to his knees and embraced the youth, only able to hold back his tears out of his duty as a comforter. Remember what I said about being there for your friends, Naruto? He asked softly. He felt the nod and heard a sharp sniff. Sasuke is going to be in pain for a long time. As his best friend, I trust you'll do everything you can to help him. Unquote. Another nod was all Naruto could manage before he was crying outright. Iruka already knew that no amount of comfort or understanding could mend the Uchiha's wounds. No matter the pain that Naruto has suffered his whole life, having one's entire family taken from him in one night was a whole different brand of devastation. All around Konoha that night and morning, parents hugged their children a little tighter than normal. The situation was either explained delicately or overheard, and by the next morning the whole town knew of the scandal. The students filed into class silently, the weight of what had happened not lost on their young minds. As Naruto reached the top of the stairs leading to his row, Hinata all but sprinted into the room, bolting straight up the aisle and colliding with him hard. It took a moment for anybody surrounding to notice what had happened, but as soon as they had their eyes averted, trying their best to hold back tears of their own, Naruto had been knocked down with his back against the wall, Hinata's tiny arms wrapped around his waist, her face buried in his chest. Much later she might look back and feel ashamed for her actions, but not now. Naruto's face contorted again as he felt his friend's hot tears seeping through his shirt, but he willed himself not to cry. Instead he just leaned over the girl, putting one hand on her back and the other on her shoulder like he had seen some adults and older kids do to comfort people. Iruka had watched silently as the Hyuga girl had entered and shot to Naruto for comfort. His eyes averted as well. He knew it would be impossible to remain stoic if he watched. Hiyashi had likely informed his family of the occurrence in the manner fitting of one so cold, emotionlessly, and offering no comfort to the daughter for whom the news impacted so much. Judging by the way Hinata had reacted, it was likely she had spent the early morning by herself. Class is cancelled today, Iruka said flatly, standing slowly and looking over his class. None of them looked like they would be able to focus on their studies today. Hell, he would not be able to. I'll see you all tomorrow. Unquote. One by one they stood and exited the room silently, none of them wanting to be the first to mention why they were all upset. As the last student left the room, Shino, looking straight-faced as Iruka could tell behind his sunglasses and high collar, Iruka looked to the top row. Hinata was still quavering but seemed to have loosened her grip on Naruto. He was simply staring at his instructor with a pleading expression, eyes asking why such a thing had to happen. "Let's go, Naruto. Hinata, I want you to come with us too." She did not move, and Naruto looked down with no small amount of concern, before glancing back up and mouthing the word sleeping with a questioning expression. Iruka could only assume Hiashi had woken his family in the middle of the night to inform them, and following that the young girl had tired herself out by crying for hours. "Can you carry her, Naruto?" he asked quietly. "We're going to the park." A few minutes later found Iruka and Naruto walking side by side towards the west side of the village, their shadows long in the rising sunlight. Hinata's diminutive form was draped across Naruto's arms, her knees bent over his right forearm while his left supported her back. Her head rested against his shoulder, tear-stained face still red from crying but otherwise peaceful. Iruka looked down at the pair and couldn't help but smile, an expression tainted by the sadness he felt for their friend and the many citizens who had lost their lives the night before. Naruto would take care of his friends. Iruka did not need to remind him. Before long they were sitting on a bench in the park, watching the sunrise. Naruto had gently placed Hinata down on the bench, though only after Iruka chastised him did he gingerly place the girl's head on his lap. Despite the gravity of the situation, the blonde still had the presence of mind to blush a little. Of all the things he had missed out on, interaction with girls seemed to be the haziest situation for the boy. From dealing with his peers he was now aware at least that sometimes you liked one another, but that was the extent of it. Iruka had to admit that Naruto was a bit oblivious, but that was alright. They were still a bit young to be thinking about such things. Naruto was just being a good friend. "Do they know who did it, sensei?" Naruto asked quietly after a while, the sun's glare in his bright blue eyes. He looked older all of a sudden, much older than the 8-year-old he was. Iruka hesitated, but decided it was better he say it than the truth be overheard from gossip. "Sasuke's brother, Itachi." Naruto's wide-eyed disbelief was merited. Sasuke only ever spoke highly of his brother, and Iruka knew well the genius Itachi was. Itachi? By himself? The child's brain was trying to put together how that was even possible. He knew well that there were shinobi that were skilled enough to take on a lot of enemies by themselves, but the entire Uchiha clan? Sasuke had told him vaguely how many people there were in the clan. They had their own miniature town basically. Itachi is considered a genius of the Uchiha clan, Naruto. That's why Sasuke looked up to him so much. Itachi went to the academy and graduated in only a year, at the age of 7. He became a chunin when he was 10, an Anbu agent at 11, and was an Anbu captain at 13. Naruto's bewildered expression increased in magnitude as the Uchiha's accomplishments were listed. Most students did not even graduate from the academy until they were 11 or 12, but Sasuke's brother had been an Anbu by then. Only a genius could be admitted to the special forces at that age. He began to understand how such a thing had been possible, especially by somebody who was trusted by his people. "What happens now?" he asked dismally, wondering if his friend would ever be the same again. "I don't know, Naruto," Iruka sighed, which elicited an incredulous look from his student. "I don't know everything, kiddo," he chided gently, allowing himself to smirk. "What I do know is that it will be hard. When you see Sasuke again he might not be the same, he might never be the same. I don't know what he'll do, either. But you know what you need to do." It was not a question, but Naruto nodded nonetheless. He would do what he could for Sasuke. 2 weeks passed without Sasuke in the classroom. No matter how many times Iruka asked after his whereabouts or how his student was, he received the same answer: "He'll be back in class soon." Naruto and Hinata had put on brave faces, but there was little in the ways of laughter or even smiles those days. Naruto did his best to try and cheer his friend up, but it was difficult for many reasons. They hadn't seen Sasuke in a while, they had no idea when he was getting back, or if he was going to come back. Naruto's normal light-hearted, positive attitude remained by force of will, but it was strained. Then finally, one morning in early November, Sasuke walked into the classroom a few minutes late. Or at least, Iruka thought it was Sasuke. He no longer wore his black, long-sleeved shirt with a not quite Shino-level collar. In its place was a similarly collared short sleeve the color of cobalt, the Uchiha clan symbol sewn on the back. His forearms and lower legs were covered by white warmers with blue straps. At least the familiar white shorts completed the attire. But it was not the clothing that made Sasuke look different. It was his eyes. Sasuke stalked to his usual seat without saying a word, not even to Naruto or Hinata as they sat speechless while he passed by to sit by the window. The Uchiha survivor put his elbows on the table, wove his fingers together, and stared out the window. Sasuke always had black eyes so dark that his pupil was not even visible, but those eyes held knowledge now, years of experience and hardship in only 2 weeks. His face was devoid of emotion. It was worse than Iruka had expected. Naruto stared for a while before trying his hand at a broad grin. Sasuke, it's been in quad. Shut up. And quad. Naruto blinked. Sasuke had not even twitched, only stated in a quiet, flat voice his desire for his friend not to speak. The blonde glanced at Hinata, who shook her head as if to say let's leave him alone for now and Appas. The rest of the class simply stared for a while before Iruka coughed and continued the lesson, trying to give his student time to acclimate. The entire day passed without another word from him. The only time Sasuke showed emotion throughout the next day was during taijutsu practice. But the expressions were not indicative of who the boy used to be. He was ruthless in his sparring, furious at every point scored against him, and sneering at every victory. Hinata and Naruto were the only ones spared of his scorn, though they did experience his ferocity. It felt like they had never even fought him before. The Hyuga girl had only scored 1 point before Sasuke struck 3 in quick succession, not at all bothering to be soft. One blow left a bruise on Hinata's neck, the other 2 likely the same on her shoulder and torso. He did not return her bow at the conclusion. Naruto stepped up to silence, nobody daring to cheer one or the other on. He was unsure what to do as he lowered himself into his stance, waiting. Sasuke, without warning Sasuke leapt towards him, and he swore there had been a guttural growl preceding the onslaught. It was everything he could do to keep on his feet and defend, taking 2 hits within a minute and struggling not to fall so easily. Sasuke was smirking at him the whole time in a way that made the blonde want to shudder. You and Hinata are the only ones that have a chance to get through to him. And quad. Iruka's words from the night before rang loudly in Naruto's ears. In a sudden surge of energy Naruto blocked a jab so hard it threw Sasuke off balance. In an instant it was over, with the dark-haired youth flat on his back, expressionless as if nothing had happened. Naruto stood over him, breathing hard. He was breathing hard. Hinata approached timidly to stand next to him, looking extremely nervous. Sasuke, Naruto started quietly, offering a hand to his fallen comrade. I know how hard you've had it recently, but please don't take your anger out on us. We're your friends, all of us. And quad. Kiba looked a bit begrudging but nodded from his place in the circle. Ino and Sakura both agreed emphatically, while Shino nodded silently with no change of expression. Shikamaru shrugged and muttered something about being troublesome, while Choji continued munching on his signature bag of chips. Hinata did her best to smile, but ended up flushing and looking embarrassed as usual. Iruka watched silently, proud of his students for rallying around Sasuke. I don't need friends, he said loud enough for everyone in attendance to hear. Hinata covered her mouth and took a step back, and Naruto clenched his fist. Sasuke reached up and swatted his hand away, performing a quick kip-up before shoving his hands in his pockets and walking off. Iruka bit his lip and shook his head. Hinata and Naruto stood together, staring after their friend. Sasuke did not return to classes that day. In Konoha, as in most hidden villages, children were considered adults upon graduation from the academy. Generally speaking, that meant that every genin was mature enough to serve his or her village, and even die for it. However, Iruka could see in several of his students' eyes that adulthood had come early. Reality seemed to have seeped into many, the knowledge that any of them could be killed at any time, forcing some to drop out. By mid-December there were 22 left. New students were brought in to take their places. It would be a waste to not fill the empty spaces. Naruto had decided to give Sasuke space. He and Hinata could do little else since Sasuke refused to associate with anybody. Instead they trained as a pair, spending longer hours than before together. Both achieved landmark successes just before Hinata's birthday on December 27th. Naruto finally managed to mold just enough chakra to summon a single cage bunshine successfully. He had managed to make 2 or 3 before that, but Iruka had insisted he have the capability to make just 1. He, and his clone, had been so excited they had high-fived hard enough to disperse the bunshine, sending Hinata into a fit of giggles. He had to do it again to prove to Iruka he was able to. Hinata's success came in her chakra capacity and endurance, so it was a much more subtle change that Iruka had to point out to her. The young Hyuga had trained with Naruto so long that her stamina had increased rapidly without her realizing it. By late December she was able to spar at moderate intensity for almost an hour, and could go all out for a half an hour. The first time Naruto actually became winded during a match Iruka happened to be watching, and the Chunin nearly fell over laughing. Naruto had gotten worn down by the girl. While it was hilarious to him, Hinata looked incredibly self-conscious and chagrined, but after quite a bit of encouragement and praise by Naruto she finally offered a small smile and blushed appreciatively. Neither of them ever gave up on Sasuke, though. Several times a week they would invite him to come spar after classes, and every time he either did not respond or refused flatly. Against his better judgment, Naruto got frustrated one afternoon following their dismissal. As usual, they were the last in the room aside from Iruka. Sasuke, I'm tired of this, he said honestly with a sigh, slumping back into his seat while Hinata stared at the table pushing her index fingers together. Sasuke did not react. It was the middle of spring now, and they had not been together as a trio since before the Uchiha clan massacre. Naruto understood, but at the same time he did not. I know how and quat. Don't tell me you know how I feel, Naruto, Sasuke practically hissed, gripping his own fingers tightly. You never had any parents. You never had a family. You don't know what it's like to lose everyone. And quat. Hinata choked a little, but Naruto just watched his friend closely. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I don't really know how you feel, Sasuke, but I do know that what you're doing isn't going to help solve anything. What's your goal? Across the room, pretending to be busy with his paperwork, Iruka blinked. Sasuke snorted like it was a joke. I want to kill Itachi. That's all. And quat. His voice was mechanical, flat. It was the most obvious thing in the world to him. It's the only reason I'm alive. And quat. Naruto gave him a hard look, but he ignored it. He had not been there, had not seen what Sasuke had. He had not been there when Itachi had trapped him with the Mangekyo Sharingan and tortured him, making him relive the murder of his parents over and over and over again. Fine, then let me help too. And quat. Sasuke's first show of emotion was surprise, turning to blink at his friend as if searching for an explanation. We're friends, Sasuke. If you want to kill Itachi, then I'll help you get stronger so that you can one day. And quat. And me also, Sasuke-san, Hinata inserted, looking uncomfortable but determined. Sasuke looked from one to the other, shaking his head after a moment. You guys can't help me, he said after a moment, turning back to the window. His hands were visibly shaking now. He was not telling them everything. Itachi. And quat. He began in a gruff tone, determined to stare at nothing while he spoke. He said I would have to kill my best friend in order to defeat him, in order to activate my. And quat. Sasuke hesitated, deciding against telling them the fullness of the Uchiha secret. To activate a higher level Sharingan. I can't have friends, I don't want that power. And quat. Oh shut up Sasuke, Naruto grinned, rolling his eyes. You're so dramatic. Come on, Hinata and I both know you're not going to try to kill us. Even if you do, we'll team up and beat some sense into you. Right Hinata? Despite looking mortified at the suggestion, she nodded quickly. See? You can have friends, Sasuke. Just don't let your brother taunt you like that. You'll get him one day, the right way, and we'll be there to help you when that happens. And quat. A long moment passed with Sasuke's blank expression slowly softening, until the slightest of smirks graced his lips. For once in his life, the boy looked vulnerable, if only for a moment before collecting himself and nodding. Alright, I'll try. And quat. Naruto was instantly ecstatic, chattering away as they walked to the yard to train together for the first time in months. Hinata remained silent while wiping away a tear or two, smiling at her friends as they went. Iruka had kept his head down during the ordeal, but had hung on every word exchanged between the trio. He had felt pangs of sorrow, welling pride, and finally joy and relief. Without his aid they were back together again, and things could start getting back to normal and healing. Sasuke would never be the same again, he knew, and it was likely Hinata and Naruto knew as well. But they were together, and would help him get through this. The instructor's role in his students' lives was shrinking, and he knew it. Even Naruto, who had made so much progress in the last 2 years, was learning to think for himself and handle situations using his own intuition and intellect. If one of them had trouble with something, the other two would step up and provide their help. In a few years they would be out of the academy, and they would be off in the world on missions for the village. But Iruka was satisfied for the role he had played. His last act as their teacher would be to assign them into groups of 3 post-graduation, to be placed on teams with a jonin teacher that would oversee their development into chunin. For that Iruka would fight tooth and nail for, no matter the objections that might be raised. He owed it to them. Before he knew it, summer had arrived, bringing with it daily training sessions for Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke. Iruka watched when he had the time, ever impressed at the progress his students continued to make day in and day out. Ever since they had learned of the 3 jutsus they were required to know for graduation, a portion of every day had been dedicated to their mastery. Hinata and Sasuke could easily perform their bunshine and transformation techniques, and while Naruto had never gotten the hang of the standard clone, he could reliably form anywhere from 1 to 10 kage bunshine. He also seemed to have a knack for the Henge no Jutsu. All 3 of them, however, needed to work on their Kawarimi no Jutsu. Iruka had told them that it was one of the most important. The substitution ability would save their lives in the future. You know, Iruka started carefully, eyeing the children as he approached. At this rate you 3 could probably graduate in a year or 2 instead of waiting 4 more. You'd be Jinan at an earlier age than most, but I think you might be ready by then. And quat. Naruto looked excited, but the enthusiasm quickly diminished as he thought on it for a moment. Sasuke shrugged and continued his chakra exercises, while Hinata looked worriedly to Naruto. I think I'd rather stay at the academy, sensei. We still have a lot we can learn there, and I like our classmates a lot. I want to graduate with them, too. And quat. Iruka had to stifle a grin, and merely nodded instead. His son's loyalty was admirable. Son? He blinked at the thought, looking down at the blonde youth that was scratching the back of his neck. It had only been 2 years, but Iruka had watched as Naruto had grown from the village's most detested delinquent to a determined, hard-working ninja in training. Konoha's citizens still sneered and grimaced at him, still hated him for all the wrong reasons, but he had stayed strong throughout. Iruka was proud to be Naruto's guardian and mentor, and maybe one day would allow himself to consider the boy as family. The Chunin turned with a wave, walking slowly back to his apartment and into the light of the setting sun. It was no time to be thinking of things like that, he chided himself. They were already growing up. He made a mental note to talk to Naruto soon about how to treat young women. The way Hinata was starting to look at the blonde boy told him that it would be a necessary conversation.